Culture Hour. My name is Shelley Smith, the proud owner of Premier Rapport, where everything that myself and my team does is workplace culture related, because we know that you've got to define it, and then you've got to build it, and then you've got to maintain it, because it's far more costly and, good Lord, stressful if we go into repair mode. Today, I am thrilled. I will admittedly say I stumbled across Jenn Graham, but I am really thrilled, and you're going to be thrilled too to hear what she does, because you may be blind and not know about this either. So Jenn Graham is on a mission to design a more inclusive world. Recently named the 2020 World Changing Women in Conscious Business. Oh my goodness. By Conscious Company Media. When I read that, I was like, what? Jenn Graham is the founder and the CEO of Civic Dinners, and I'm going to let her describe what Civic Dinners is in her own words in just a minute. But bringing diverse voices together over food for conversation that matters. Since starting the Civic Dinners as a social experiment in Atlanta, Jenn has built a global team and a digital platform that has enabled over 1,500 dinners around the world, with a goal of inviting 1 million people to the table by 2021. Jenn was recently also named Atlanta Business Chronicle's 2019 Small Business Person of the Year Rising Star, and is a Civic Innovation Fellow Startup Runway winner. Jenn has a 15-year track record in combining her business, design thinking background — I love everything design thinking, by the way — with her personal passion for community engagement to help communities build empathy, raise awareness, understanding, collective action around critical issues. So obviously, listeners and viewers, you know exactly why I have Jenn on today. Jenn, why don't you fill in the blanks of anything about you that I didn't say? And then certainly let's unpack and reset the table and talk about what in the world is Civic Dinners, and we'll go from there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me on the Culture Hour. Big fan of culture. And I think for me, to change a culture, you have to change the stories. And that really goes back to how Civic Dinners started. I was a former TEDx Atlanta organizer. So for 5 years, as part, outside of my day job, I helped organize these big events with community leaders across Atlanta, bringing people together across Atlanta, coaching speakers on how to give like the talk of their life in 18 minutes. And this was even before people knew what TED was. So explaining, well, it's 18 minutes, you pitch your idea. And it started to blow up. And so much so that after about a dozen or so events, it became a bit exhausting. I suddenly started to get a bit jaded and frustrated with the lack of change that I was able to see after an event, and after pouring so much energy and effort into getting the right speaker lineups, diverse audience, everybody there, and suddenly realized that the change I was trying to seek doesn't happen in an auditorium or in rows. It only happens when you allow people to have a more intimate space, like around in circles, and to give people a chance to actually have dialogue and to learn how they could collaborate around a particular issue and actually drive that forward. So I kind of pivoted in my thinking around thought leadership and how to move people to take action, and went smaller. So I studied Jeffersonian dinners and salons and all of the mechanisms that allowed people to gather meaningfully around issues. And that's how Civic Dinners began. It was a way to have an intimate meeting with 6 to 10 people, typically gathered around a dinner table. But in the age of COVID, that switched to Zoom rooms. So, which, thank God, are still just as meaningful and impactful. With the video, people are willing to be as open and vulnerable to share their true stories and their experience, but also to listen. I think the key thing is we don't listen enough. We often are opening, our mouths, or trying to figure out what we're going to say next. But really, leadership now that we need more than ever is emotional leadership, and that requires listening and really understanding people's perspectives in order to really find the real truth of what's going on. So I feel like our model has kind of come at a time when we need to be listening to ourselves, to others, and our way has the model of 3 big questions with just equal time to share and one voice at a time creates a really kind of a democratic way of having a meaningful conversation. So there's no expert in the room, there's no dialogue, there's no like debate. So you don't have to worry about bringing your, fully armed. It's more about just sharing stories and really getting to know others.
So I have so many questions for you. I'm just going to throw a lot at you, and then you can pick, choose, and respond. So I'm wondering, how long are the dinners? How many people? How did they get invited? And how do you figure out the questions?
Yeah.
Let's unpack that first, and then let's talk about recent events and some of your upcoming dinners that you have planned.
Awesome. So a typical civic dinner has been in the past, 6 to 10 people per table. So you could potentially we've had events with Coca-Cola that had 300 employees at once, as long as they were seated at tables of 8-ish around the table. We provide the host guide and the host card with the questions. So we've done the hard work for what our corporate clients, our partners, our nonprofit partners, and then general public. So people go to civicdinners.com and you can find a conversation topic that you're interested in, whether that's affordable housing or bridging the racial divide or grief and gratitude that's in response to COVID. And you can host your own, and you just set it. The technology has just been able to make it super simple and easy for anybody to host, even around the world. So we have, you just set up the date, the time, the location. Obviously now we're mostly supporting virtual dinners through our technology that we built in, just the video capability. So these virtual rooms are available, or you can choose your own. And the topics, the guides, we spend so much energy and time in designing these conversations. And it kind of goes back to that research around community organizing. How do we move people to actually take action? It's not enough just to inspire people or to like get people to bond. For me, I really want people to connect more to the issue, hence our name, Civic Dinners, to like find their role that they can play in this issue. And so the way we design a conversation includes kind of 3 component pieces. We usually have the story of self. So how do you personally connect to this issue? Tell me a time when you've experienced this, blank, blank, blank. Or the second question being like, what's the real root of the problem? Let's get to the meat of it, the core of the issue. What are the barriers keeping us from the vision that we want? And that tension between what we want versus what we have now is what creates that desire to take action. And then so the final question is typically, what do you personally commit to do? As an individual, as a leader in an organization, as a member of your church or your place of worship, and in your neighborhood. So like there are lots of influences of circles that we have that we can create change. So we model that through our questions, and always we want people to leave feeling hopeful, feeling just empowered. And so they're not just pointing fingers, but they really feel like they have ownership of the issue and that they have something that they can do.
How long does it usually last?
Great. So typically in-person dinners pre-COVID, we recommended 2 hours if you were hosting at your home or your office space or a restaurant, because you have the normal 15 to 30 minutes of just greeting people, having people get to know another, light introductions. You might order food or sit down, and maybe have some interruptions with the waiters coming in and taking orders. But in online, you don't have that. So you can actually have conversations within an hour, especially if companies want to launch like power lunches. We have a way of, it's not just a civic dinner. You can do them any time of the day. We have them built in. You have happy hours, lunchtime, breakfasts, but you can do it within 45 minutes to an hour if you have 6 to 8 people.
Okay. And you talked about, obviously closing it out with feeling better, the inspiration side. Is there also a component that you bring that helps them turn it into an actionable session as well for those accountability commitments?
Absolutely. So besides the final question being very action oriented, We have a whole built into the technology. We have follow-up emails that are sent even like in a immediately after, 3 days later, and then a week later with specific next steps that they can take on that issue. So whether it doesn't include exactly what they personally committed to in that, but these are like options that they can take even further, starting from low-hanging fruit all the way to the deeper commitments that they can sign up for and commit to. So we definitely want to encourage that. The last question is typically around ideation and commitment around ideas and actions they can take. And so even if you yourself don't have an idea or don't know what to do, you're listening to 6 other people share what they're thinking, and then you walk away being like, oh, I can do this. They're doing it, I can do it. So it's that positive peer pressure in a way that pushes you and holds you accountable. And we sometimes the questions, like we just created one, we finished one even yesterday, that is around reckoning with racial injustice. So given the times, so many companies and even cities are really like, okay, enough is enough. Like we know that racial injustice is not okay. We can't just lay silent. We have to do something. What do we do? And being able to bring people together to help even in that ideation of like, what does the new world look like? How do we rethink all of the systems engaged in this? Not just police reform, which is super important, but also
it's more than that.
It's more than that. And so it's like, how can we invite the community? How can we invite company leadership together to come and think about what can they do and how can they hold each other accountable? How can they hold ourselves accountable? We have a great one on unconscious bias, which is a conversation that is so needed in organizations, especially now. The people are like finally waking up to it and realizing that we all have unconscious bias. It's just how our brains have been hardwired, and understanding that and just being able to like walk through, it's almost a simulation of experience. It's not about blaming or pointing fingers or calling you out. It's about holding yourself accountable and going back in time and sharing those experiences that can really be life lessons for others. And sometimes when you share during a civic dinner, sometimes it's the first time you yourself have heard yourself. Yeah. And that can be game changing. It's like a form of therapy in a way, but
it is. I love everything about that and feel silly that I've never heard of this and what you're doing. I mean, we have a local civic institute, but I'm not aware of them doing anything like this. So I certainly, this is on a whole nother level. So for the people who are watching, listening, you can take this on your own and create your own group, but you can also bring this inside of your organization, to your point. Right. Get it stood up. And so can you also facilitate it on your own, but can you also bring one of your team members in to help facilitate as well? Okay. All right.
Yep. Yeah. So we have, we recommend, or these are designed to be pretty simple, easy to self-organize and to self-facilitate. We offer facilitation training, especially around sensitive topics and issues. So like how to respond if someone says, well, I'm colorblind, or all lives matter, when you're in a conversation about racism, and how to address that without shutting down someone, but also to acknowledge what the conversation is really about. And to kind of address that so that it doesn't harm others in the conversation. So we do provide some guidance around like what to say when, how to, if someone's a big talker, like how to, there's like light facilitation 101. Anybody who's run a meeting before probably has been just either experienced enough to be able to do this, or has done some form of 101 training and facilitation. So we definitely want to encourage more people to have these conversations. That's our whole mission, is to create a more inclusive world where everyone has a voice and co-creating a better future. And so with that in mind, we don't want to mandate that everybody has to be trained in our model before they can feel confident hosting. That's not the case. So we do provide additional feedback for those, or tips for those who want it and need it. So we want to encourage companies, like we just launched our inclusive series that includes 21 topics, and it's growing every day. around issues that relate to diversity and inclusion, and in HR, from health and wellness to mental health to understanding race, unconscious bias, power and privilege, like going really deep, and even those around women in leadership, like understanding the biases that we have, whether being a woman or being disabled or being age, and all the components that affect our working environments. Having conversations and being able to allow space for people to share how they've been feeling and how they can ultimately bring their whole selves to the workplace to be the most productive and happy that they can be.
Yeah, I again, it's amazing. I applaud you. Definitely conversations, as human beings, I think it doesn't mean that we don't want to have tough conversations, but we typically shy away from them because we don't know what to say, or we're so concerned about saying the wrong thing, especially now. I think over the last year, that sense of fear of it's going to be misinterpreted has been heightened, but definitely within the last 7 days, 10 days, well, now we're on, I think, day 12 of the recent injustice, and it just becomes more difficult to have the conversation. So I love that you have this platform to help people do it. Are there any, and I should have asked you this beforehand so you could think through it, but off the cuff, are there any wins that you can share with any of the roundtable discussions? Because I want to take you back to what I heard you say, why you did this, and while you're thinking about that, I also wanted to share that in my local area, I do the Disrupt HR, which is 10 to 15 speakers that have a 5-minute presentation. So it is the TED Talk on steroids, and it's crazy what you can say in 5 minutes. But I stopped doing them not because I'm not passionate about them, but because of what you said earlier. I wasn't seeing the impact and the change after people left the auditorium, and I started to get frustrated, and it was exhausting, and I didn't find it to be rewarding. So I shifted gears into creating the culture curators membership, for example. But just when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally get it. But going back to the question, is there any group that sort of resonates that you saw the change, or the change is happening?
Oh, definitely. It's
all
happening.
right.
Whether or not I know it or not, it's definitely happening. But the ones that I know about, our first initiative that we launched in 2015, which goes back to the beginning, was actually in partnership with the Regional Commission. So Atlanta Regional Commission in Atlanta is in charge of the long-range planning for 25 years into the future. And for a long time, they hadn't ever thought about engaging millennials or younger voices. That was a missing voice in their planning and their audience. And so they came to me saying, Jen, like, how do we get millennials more engaged in this? And we had just piloted this, idea of like, oh, we just did dinners, just talking about the future of Atlanta, but it just took off, and millennials were just flocking to these dinners. And so, well, they wanted their voices to be heard by leaders. ARC wanted to listen. So it was a perfect match. And with that, we ended up creating 3 big conversation topics around transportation, the future of infrastructure, future of mobility, the one around prosperity, and another around livability, like how do we live? So mobility, livability, and prosperity. And had 35 dinners over the course of 3 months, engaging 300 millennials across the region, so the most diverse group of millennials that we had ever seen participate in this kind of effort. And then what we did was once we reflected back, okay, here are the common themes, which they did. Transit was the first time affordable housing ever showed up on the radar of the ARC. But maybe because it was the younger generation trying to afford to buy a house and couldn't find anything. And rent going up. And so, but then also education and food access, like all the major just basic human needs for what they wanted. And so what we decided to do was launch action teams. And so we had them choose one of those issues that emerged, join an action team. We taught them how to write op-eds. We taught them how to use their voice on existing platforms to help get the word out. Media ate it up. And
Okay.
from that work, we asked them to also pitch their recommendations to regional leaders. So for the first time, the tables were flipped. We brought back that 5-minute pitch, like a TED Talk, coached them on how to give a really great pitch and use storytelling that matched with data. And from there, we had 2 teams launch nonprofits, one being a coalition to advance regional transit, which had very successful. It's still 4.5 years old and still rocking. But they've been getting major referendums on the ballots in counties all across Atlanta, including it played a big role in Atlanta and getting a $2.8 billion referendum passed in the city of Atlanta. So I was like, what? And then we had 2 other teams have helped pass legislation and various things from affordable housing policy to even like something at the state legislature. And then we had 6 people that I know of run for office, from school board to city council to all the way to state legislator. The woman who ran for Stacey Abrams' seat in the House is now the only and youngest Asian American female in the House of Representatives for Georgia. So she, felt so empowered that her voice mattered, and it felt heard and it was needed, that she decided to run.
I have chills.
Yeah. So and we've had other initiatives later on. We had 2 people meet at a Voice of Women civic dinner 3 years ago, and they ended up bonding over their shared need for a community for women, and now have 3 years later launched the Lola, which is a first community for women. It's a co-working space, and it's amazing that what they've built and created. And we were just lucky to be part of their founding story, that they met at a civic dinner. We've had others, build lifelong relationships and friendships with others, people from different backgrounds that they normally would never have met or crossed. So I think there's just endless, it's like that when you really want to connect over shared interest, it's the best way to get to know someone and form a new kind of relationship that can be long lasting. It's not meant to be kind of just one off. It's really, once you connect about something that you're really passionate about, it can be game changing. So we are getting better about tracking that and kind of impact. Yeah. But in the meantime, I think it's really, I'm just amazed and excited to see what we've been able to do so far.
Well, bravo to you and your team and everybody who has participated in the past. Those are some really great wins. And like you said, there's probably a ton of them, obviously, by any of the conversations, because if you want to come to the table, you obviously have interest and passion and you want to make a change. So that in itself is huge. Right. My first book that I wrote, something you just said, was called The Connection. And for me, it wasn't about the networking. There was a chapter about networking, but really it is about the idea and the realization that literally we have connections all around us, all throughout the day, and how are we consuming and leaning into them, and listening to those ideas and thoughts. So again, I applaud you. So in a wrap today, is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to tell the listeners and viewers, a challenge of any sort? And then if you can restate your website again one more time.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been, amazing to be part of this. Civic Dinners, again, our purpose is all about creating a more inclusive culture. So I love your focus on creating, just more compassionate cultures and leaders. And I would love if there are anybody who's listening, who's interested in really launching civic dinners or even conversations in your workplace or in your city or in your community or nonprofit, definitely reach out to us. You can find us at civicdinners.com, or you can email us at hello@civicdinners.com, and we'll share more about the inclusive series that we have offering us all. We also have a sustainability series, smart city series coming out, more conversations on the critical issues that we need to talk about. So.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much again, Jenn Graham from Civic Dinners. We appreciate all of the viewers, all of the questions, the comments that come in after each and every one of our shows, and the recommendations of other folks that you want me to have on and to tell a little bit about their story and what they're doing to impact their workplace culture. So again, if you've got any questions, you guys know how to find me and hit me up. Remember, culture isn't built in a day. Culture is built every day. Culture matters. And it starts with every single one of us. That's it for today. Be well, be safe, and make an impact on somebody's life today.